Hi guys, please take out your packet and look at page 13. So pause the video and have your packet out. I am going to go through some of these examples and give you notes, and then I want you to copy those notes. So I know we did 1 and 2 in class on page 13. I just want to make sure everyone's okay with the answers. So if we want the absolute value of x to be grouped bigger than 4, so obviously all numbers are bigger than 4, they will satisfy this inequality. Just to remind you, if you are solving an inequality, your answer is going to be an interval. It's not going to be just one value. So obviously, I'm sure we're all comfortable with this when x is greater than 4. But you know, when we take the absolute value of, let's say, -5, it turns into +5, and +5 is greater than 4. So there's these two parts to the answer, and because they're not overlapping and they don't share anything, we can't write it using an intersection. We're going to have to write it using a union. So this is from -infinity to -4, bracket on that, union, and this part is from 4 to infinity. Okay, and then this one was less than 5, so obviously we're going to go, all my values are going to be smaller than 5, but I can't keep on going forever. I can't. I have to stop at -5. So the answer is in between. So if your inequality is less than, your answer is in between. In between the 5 and the -5, so in between is what like my hands will do in class. If your inequality is greater than 4, then from 4 it's going to go right, and then from -4 it's going to go left. And so this is the answer I wrote for -5. Okay, so before I go on to, actually we can look at this. So I would watch, and then you can always go back and copy. So looking for the absolute value of 3x is less than 18, we want our numbers to be less than 18. So they're going to be in between, my 3x's are going to be in between 18 and -18. And then we want to solve for x, so we divide everything by 3. And then my final answer in interval notation is from -6 to +6. Let me draw that on the number line, -6, +6. Yeah, and then these are my solutions. It's a good idea to check your work. Make sure that if I plugged in 7, it's not going to work. And if I plug in 2, it is going to work. So that's the answer in interval notation. Here, before I can start doing the whole more is or coming up with my 2 inequalities, first I have to get rid of the 2. So the absolute value of x plus 2 is greater than 3. I divided both sides by 2. And now we want our numbers to be, when I add 2 to my x, I want them to be greater than 3. It's this portion of my number line. So greater than 3 means I want x plus 2 to be greater than 3. But then there's also this other set, the set that was to the left of -4. So I'm splitting it up into 2 separate inequalities. This is like my line separating the 2 inequalities. So I'm going to take this inequality, and I also want to discuss the numbers that are less than, look, the arrow is going left, -3. So I need to solve these 2 separate inequalities. This is going to give me x is greater than 1. This is going to give me x is less than -5. Let me graph it. Greater than 1 looks like that. Less than -5 looks like that. And look, my 2 unions, my 2 arrows going 2 separate ways. More is or. This is an or situation. -infinity to -5, parentheses union, 1 to infinity, parentheses, parentheses. So let's make sure you understand this. Divide both sides by 2. And now if we want some numbers that are greater than 3, either, and again, obviously 3 is not going to be an answer because it says absolute value of x plus 2. We want numbers that when I add 2 are bigger than 3, so my arrow goes to the right, and that's this portion. And we want this quantity to be less than -3, and that is this inequality right here. All right, notes, please copy the notes. So, first one is if you have the absolute value of ax plus b is greater than c, then your answers come out to be, actually change of plans, I'm sorry. Let's not call this greater than C. Sorry, let's not call this absolute value x plus b. Let's just keep it simple. If you can just erase that, I'm going to start from scratch. Sorry, if absolute value of x, let's just keep it simple, is greater than C, then you get answers that are greater than C or answers are less than negative C. And that's what we did here. Greater than 4 or less than negative 4. And then if you have the absolute value of x to be less than C, if it's less than C or less than 5, our answer is going to be in between 5 and negative 5. So then my x's are going to be in between C and negative C. The only thing that might get confusing or actually messes up this definition is when C is not positive. So let's make sure, note, C is a positive constant or a positive number. I'm sure that you know what happens. So for example, what if we want the absolute value of x to be greater than 5? So I'm going to really quickly throw that in here. If we want the absolute value of x, not greater than 5, let's do less than a negative. We want the absolute value, let's make C be a negative. We want the absolute value of x to be less than negative 5. So the absolute value is always positive. So how is it ever going to be less than negative 5? So no solution. Think about it. Absolute value of x is always greater than 0. It's always positive. It's never going to be less than negative 5. What if they want the absolute value of x to be greater than negative 5? If you want the absolute value of x to be greater than negative 5, well, duh, it's always going to be true. Absolute value is always positive. It's always bigger than 0, so it's always going to be bigger than negative 5. The answer in interval notation is from negative infinity to positive infinity. It's all real numbers. Any x value would make this inequality true, and then no x value would make this inequality true. I'm going to do one more with you just to make sure that you're okay with this. I'm going to first subtract 15. If you want to pause the video and do it yourself, that's a good idea. I'm going to subtract 15, so I get 6. Stop yourself. Look, there's no negative there. And now we want 4 minus x to be greater than 6. So it's 4 minus x is going to be greater than 6, or 4 minus x is less than negative 6. This is a more is or situation. Careful when you divide by a negative 1. So careful when you divide by a negative 1. We're going to subtract 4, and I get 2. Divide both sides by a negative means you flip the sign, and I get negative 2. Here, same thing, let's subtract 4, and I get negative 10. And then when I divide both sides by a negative 1, I flip the sign, and I get my answer to be positive 10. I'm hoping I'm doing this right. It's minus 4, cool. And now it says solve the given inequality and write your answer in interval notation. We want all values that are less than negative 2. So from negative infinity to negative 2 parentheses, union, we want all values that are bigger than 10. So from 10 to infinity. I'm hoping that helps. And then homework is going to be to do number 6. And the next page is going to be to do page 14, but only the top numbers. Okay.